Hello there guys, my name's Ceri Phillips at Croeso Dinefwr. Welcome to Dinefwr. I'm here in front of the old ice house on the Dinefwr estate. I thought it might be a great place in order to tell you a ghost story. Now a long time ago, there was a tradition that is said to have originated here in Wales. Now this tradition, to a modern listener, might sound a little bit macabre and even quite scary. But back in the day, it was seen as a necessity. That was the tradition of having a sin eater in the community. Now the tradition went a little something like this. Essentially, if somebody in your family had died, you would call in a sin eater. And the night before the funeral, you would lay the body of the recently deceased out, preferably in its coffin or casket, on a table in your home's largest room. You would set up some candles and you would light them. You would then proceed in the evening, before the witching hour at midnight, the night before the funeral, to produce a poultry meal. Anything you could spare, a bowl of cawl or broth, maybe a slice of bread or two, and put it in a bowl. Then you would get a cup of beer, small beer, something you could easily afford. Then you would set it in front of the body on the table, and some have even suggested that many put the meal on the corpse itself. You would then sit and wait for the sin eater to arrive, and once you heard the knock on the door, you would let him in. He would enter the largest room of the house. You would do the necessary prayers, whatever you'd like, to send the body on its way, and the sin eater would start the ritual, which involved the eating of the bread or the soup or the cawl and the drinking of the beer while standing over the body. The sin eater would then place the bowl and the cup, now empty, onto the corpse. Now what did this ritual signify? Well, the sin eater, quite literally in the minds of people back then who were highly superstitious, would be devouring the sins of the deceased, thus allowing for them to enter the kingdom of heaven with a clean bill of moral health. Now, how were these sin eaters treated? Because this was a necessity for the people back then to have in their community. Well, given that they were so full of not only the sins of your dead relative, but everyone's dead relatives in the community, they were treated like pariahs, forced to live outside of the community, at the very edges of the village or the town, in all the rural areas of Wales, and even in the counties across Offa's Dyke on the Welsh marches of England. They had to live in hovels, in cottages that were ramshackle and run down because no one could come and help them if they needed some DIY doing. These cottages and ramshackle hovels were quite often in forests, like I'm standing in now. But in the case of the story I'm about to tell you, it was up on a mountainside. This sin eater, the sin eater of the Swansea Valley of Cwm Tawe, lived on the Darren Mountain, above the village of Ystadleifera. And this particular sin eater would consume the sins of all the deceased in the whole of the Swansea Valley, from Pontardawe up to the edge of the Brecon Beacons. So he was particularly unclean in the eyes of the natives. He lived around 1850, and all the parents of the valley would tell their children especially to stay away from the sin eater of Ystadleifera. You couldn't even look at him, and you must avert his eyes when he ventured forth into the community. But 1850, the age of reason had already descended upon South Wales, so many parents didn't believe in such traditions. Such was the case with the parents of Moch Bach, little Morgan. They didn't believe in such frivolous, superstitious nonsense. They were people of reason, people of science, and they never told Moch Bach about the sin eater. And one day, in the year of 1850, near Calan Gia, All Hallows Eve, the sin eater ventured forth. Now, he was used to the town being deserted effectively because they knew he was walking down. But this time, he saw a little boy playing in a garden of a cottage in the village. So he walked up and he leant on the railings and he said, Shwmae na ngwasi. Hello there, little boy. Pwy wyt ti? Who are you? Now, Moch Bach, being a confident and intelligent little boy, said, well, Moch Bach I fi. Shwmae. I'm little Morgan. How are you? The Sin Eater leant in even closer and said, wyt ti'n gwybod pwy fi? Do you know who I am? Moch Bach put his hands in his pockets and said, well, o'n i'n meddwl ni'n nabod pawb. I thought I knew everybody. Sa'i di cwrdd â ti, I've never met you. The Sin Eater leant in even closer and said, well, fi yw'r dyn tyffish. I am the toffee man. Moch Bach looked confused. He'd never heard of such a thing as a toffee man. He said, well, beth jawch yw dyn y tyffish? What on earth is a toffee man? The Sin Eater said, well, lan ar y daren, up on the Darren Mountain, mae tŷ 'da fi. I've got a house. A yn y tŷ 'na, mae'r rhan fwyaf o'r tyffish, a'r tisienod, a'r hufen ia, a welwch chi yn y siope, a'r gros Cymru I gyd. Up in my house, you will find all the toffees and the sweets and the ice cream that are provided to all the shops in Wales. A os ddei di lan dy fi, if you come up with me, I promise you, gei di gymaint o dyffish, a losin, a hufen ia, a gallu di llenwi dy boldi da. If you come up with me, you can have all the sweets and the toffees and the ice cream you can fill your stomach with. Now Moch Bach thought to himself, this is too good to be true. But he seemed like a nice man, so he decided to follow him. And off the pair went. They went up the mountain road all the way up to the Sin Eater's home. Now the Sin Eater made very sure that he stayed at least 10 steps in front of Moch, so when he went round the corner, he could only be heard. And that's all he would say is, da iawn Moch Bach, dir ymlan. Well done, little Moch, come along. When Moch Bach got to the cottage, he couldn't see the Sin Eater anywhere, but he thought, there's no more houses up on the Darren, I may as well go in. So he entered the little ramshackle cottage, and the door slammed shut behind him. He couldn't see a thing. It was dark. A small chink of light coming through a boarded window seemed to show that there was no sweets or toffees or cakes or ice cream, but there was mountains of what looked like silver coins. Moch Bach was shocked and said, dyn tyffish? Sa'n gweld unrhyw milision, sa'n gweld unrhyw tyffish. I fi yn y lle iawn, I don't see any toffees. I can't see any sweets. Am I in the right place? Then from behind him, the Sin Eater jumped out and said, paid rydych I ffwrdd, don't run away. Beth I fi dyngos I ti fan hyn yw arian y dyn tyffish I gyd. What I'm showing to you now is all the money of the toffee man. Ac os I ti'n gallu gwneud un peth bach I fi, fe gei di'r arian ma I gyd, I ddefnyddio'n hi fel banc personol I ti. If you do one little task for me, you can get all this money. You can treat it like your own personal bank and buy as many sweets and chocolates, not just for you, but for all your family and all your friends for the rest of your life. And what he asked was this, that little Moch just stayed a night in the Sin Eater's cabin and had to leave just after breakfast. Then he could return the next day and he could use this as his own personal bank. Well, Moch Bach said, I don't see any problem with this, and he went up and prepared for bed. Now, Moch Bach had a terrible night's sleep, full of awful nightmares. He was in a cold sweat, and he had this sense of impending doom all the night through, but eventually morning came. He tramped down the stairs and said, dyn tyffish, wi bant nôl gytre nawr, na I ddod nôl fori am yn arian. He came down the stairs and he said, right then, toffee man, I'm off home. I'll be back tomorrow for my money. And just before he was about to leave, he saw the table in the middle of the room with the best breakfast spread a young boy could imagine. Beautiful, finely milled white bread, the like of which he only thought the grandest houses in Wales had. Lovely fresh butter, a bowl of porridge with llyssi in it, winberries, picked from the mountain itself, a real delicacy, and above all else, a bowl of beer. Now, Moch Bach was a really young boy. He'd never had beer before, but he thought, I'm probably the richest guy in all of South Wales now. I may as well start living by a prince. And he started eating. He had a bit of bread, and he had a bowlful of porridge to get through, and he had a whole bowl of beer as well, and started sipping at it. He had a whale of a time. But one thing annoyed him. A noise. Was it crunching or was it dragging? He gave no mind to it and kept on eating. But the noise got louder and faster. Well, he thought it must be mice. This is a ramshackle old place that I'm going to treat like a bank. And this is all silver money, not notes, so they can't eat through it. It's just rats and mice. And as he ate, the noise got more intense and quicker until he was on the last crumb of bread which he put into his mouth, and then the last drop of beer which he supped down, and then the last spoonful of porridge, and finally as he put the last sweet little whinberry into his mouth, he heard dunk, a thump. And as he was chewing the whinberry, he stood up from the table and looked at the floor, and rolling towards the door was the head of the toffee man. He was utterly shocked and jumped up from his chair with a scream. Ah! He looked under the table and he saw the body, and in his hands was a cheese cutting wire. Now, if this couldn't be bad enough, all of a sudden the door burst open and two figures burst into the house, his parents, who'd been frantic looking for him all night long. His mother looked at the scene and cried out, Vamab, my son, and went to grab him. But his father held her back. He knew what was going on and said, Mi eisiau ni ôl ar y ffeiriad. We need to get the priest. Moch bach, bydd bynnag wetus y dyn, whatever that man said, cadwa fe I dinan, tam yr ffeiriad yn dod. Keep it to yourself until the priest comes here. Now, it didn't take very long for the priest to come up, and he looked at the scene himself, and with a tut and his arm around Mock's mother said, I'm sorry. The ritual's been done. Mock has absolved the sin eater of all of his sins as he lays dead on the floor. He's eaten them all up and is now the sin eater of the Swansea Valley. And so it went that Mock Bach became the sin eater and had to live in the sin eater's old dishevelled cabin until the day he died. But what was worse is that the world moved on. Fewer and fewer people believed the old tradition, and so they forgot. He didn't get any richer than he already was at the beginning, but he still had all the sins. And he died a bitter and twisted and angry old man. And to this day, as I was told by my nan in Ystalyfera, you mustn't go up on the Darren Mountain lest you come across the ghost of Mock Bach, the last sin eater of the Swansea Valley, where he will take you and trick you as he was once tricked, and you become the next sin eater of Cwm Tawe. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, and let's enjoy the rest of the festival.